All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast. BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Now, once a week on this channel, I'm hoping to do sort of a Q&A session where I read off comments from people who have left, some things to say on the videos, and we just have a little bit of a discussion about it. But today I really just wanted to focus in on one single comment because I think there's an entire upload in itself. And somebody was leaving a comment about, I did a video on who's going to be the Libertarian nominee for president in 2020. And I was thinking about doing an entire political Q&A, but this one comment really just stood out to me. This person said 3 basic things. Number 1, Rand Paul should be the nominee for the Libertarian Party in 2020. The second thing is, the first reason. He has the name recognition. And the third thing is he can capitalize on the people who like Ron Paul, his father. I did an upload where we're just kind of listing off potential candidates that could be running for the presidency for the Libertarian Party. And, what do people think about that? Name recognition, and he has connections to Ron Paul. Well, the first thing I would have to say about that is Rand Paul is not his father. He definitely does not have, the same sort of flawlessness that Ron Paul would have in his delivery when he's just able to completely captivate, an audience, because he just sounds so convincing, whether or not you agree with Ron Paul. And there are many people out there who absolutely despise him, and you know that, and I know that, but there are many of it people who are just opposed to everything that Ron Paul has to say, but he is convincing when he, elocutes. He is very good at presenting, the constitutionalist perspective. But is Rand Paul the person to carry on the torch? Well, one of the big things I would say about this is, I was listening to Darrell W. Perry's concession speech, Darrell W. Perry, of course, ran for the Libertarian primary in 2015-16, and it's like, he ran to, as a Libertarian who's been kind of lifelong, and he said something when he was like, the Libertarian Party does not need 2 Republican governors, referring to Gary Johnson and William Weld. And it's like, that's the same thing, though, with Rand Paul. He is a Republican. And what Darrell Perry was talking about was about getting Republicans to kind of masquerade as libertarians for the presidential election. And, then once that's over, going back to being Republicans. But is that really what's going on with Rand Paul? Is he just someone like that who's going to be just putting on a facade? He definitely has a lot of libertarian elements in his, political platform. Everybody knows that. You know that, and I know that, absolutely. But one of the big things about this is he has been a Republican for years. He is part of the establishment now as being a senator from Kentucky. It's like, and let's not, and I do emphasize that. I mean, he isn't some sort of, rogue going against the grain, senator. He is a little bit different than some of the other people because of his platform, but he is not someone who has dedicated his entire life to the Libertarian Party. Some of the things, though, that we need to look at, we also need to be talking about issues. And one of the biggest things that is going to be coming up with the Libertarians is foreign policy. And I think something that not only would help Rand Paul in the chance at becoming president would, we have 2 things already. He has name recognition, connections to Ron Paul, but also he is going to be talking about non-interventionist foreign policy. And there are a lot of people out there who do not like libertarians, but they also say, hey, these guys are the ones who are trying to stop these wars. These guys are the ones who are trying to keep us out of, more military involvement in the Middle East and around various parts of the world. These people want reductions in military spending so we don't start bankrupting this country on these unnecessary wars just so we can have a flow of money from Congress to the defense contractors and this, that, and the other. That's really what the military-industrial complex is. It's just that flow of money from Congress to the defense contractors and, going around in a circular fashion as opposed to a giant convoluted conspiracy. But it's like people like Rand Paul would actually target that issue, and that's a good thing. I mean, at the very least, you might be talking about things that could potentially save people's lives, putting pressure on people to stop these unnecessary wars. almost all the independents are saying things like that. And by independents, I mean the other third parties too, like the Green Party and the Working Families Party and the Justice Party. They all want to end these unnecessary wars as well. And most of the average voters are probably somewhere in line with that. You know, no one wants their friends and family members to die in the Middle East for something that could be avoided. But one of the big things about Rand Paul being a Republican is, you saw what happened when Rand Paul ran as a Republican in 2015-16. Like, you know, what was that famous line from Donald Trump? Why is Rand Paul here? He has 1% in the polls. He should be on the undercard. He should be in the other debate or whatever it was. Well, that's kind of true in the sense that Rand Paul ran as a Republican and it did not work. That's what we can say flat out. But coming at this from more of a libertarian standpoint, does he have the ability to, you know, go over the threshold, to kind of jump the boundary and become, you know, the person who's going to, firstly, get the Libertarians 5% in the polls, 15% even, to qualify for the debates? I mean, he might be one of their most famous possibilities right now, but I could definitely see why a lot of libertarians would be opposed to him as someone, you know, who spent, you know, his career as a Republican. And you could view that as just something tactical, like, hey, that's what he had to do to get elected in the state of Kentucky. Okay, I mean, I think that's fair enough. I can be a tactical person. I'm sure you can as well at certain times. But who else would the Libertarians have to put up, you know, against him? Adam Kokesh is running, but he's very similar to Darrell W. Perry in the sense that they're both anarcho-capitalists who want to dissolve the government. And when you go to Adam Kokesh's campaign website, he has something that says, on the first day in office, he'll sign an executive order to dissolve the government. Is that really a platform that the Libertarians want to put off onto the general main stage? Is that how you're going to get elected, or at the very least climb in the polls? That I am not sure of. But one of the big things about that is, I'm really hoping that there will be other people coming from a variety of libertarian perspectives, so people can see that the Libertarian Party is not just one blanket statement. It's actually, you know, well, there are people with views up and down the spectrum. I mean, there are the classic liberals, the minarchists, the anarcho-capitalists, and the constitutionalists like Dr. Ron Paul, as well as everything in between. And there are libertarians who are pushing for taxation, you know, like the fair tax. I mean, that was maybe authored, you know, by a Republican and, you know, well, Neil Bortz as well. So, but, you know, that's also something that's gained a lot of traction in the libertarian movement. So one of the big things, though, that the libertarians need to ask themselves is, who can win and who do they agree with? Because they're going to be faced with this very large kind of two-way street. Do you vote for the candidate that you agree with, or do you vote for the candidate that you think can win? And I was listening to somebody on YouTube once, and they sort of said something very clear. These aren't my own words, I wish they were, but it's like, voting is tactical. Do you want to vote like a marriage? No. Do you want to vote like it's a contract? No. Voting is not a marriage. Voting is not a contract. Voting is tactical. It's like, what objective are you trying to accomplish? And you need to vote for that. That's just what your vote is. And, you know, what are the libertarians really trying to accomplish? Is it just about, you know, getting the 15% in the poll so that they qualify for the debates? Or is it about getting 34% in the general election? I repeat, 34%, because in a three-way race, if you have 34% of the vote, you win the popular vote. I mean, you know, if in a three-way race, if you understand what I mean, 34, 33, 32. So it's like, really, the libertarians have to really decide, you know, are they going to be putting up someone that they agree with or somebody that they think that can win and challenge the massive monolithic two-party system? Because no matter who the libertarians put up in 2020, they're going to have a mountain to climb, not only with Donald Trump, the incumbent, but I was just reading an article from Andrew Yang, who I've covered his candidacy on this channel, and he was saying that he's predicting that there will be up to 25 Democratic contenders for Donald Trump in 2020. I mean, you can imagine the debates. We're going to probably have 12 people on the primetime debate and 13 people on the undercard then. It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be a raging shitstorm. And it's like, they're just going to be squabbling back and forth in the Democratic Party, and a lot of good ideas might be lost in the crossfire. So I'm really hoping that the Libertarians don't blow up in that fashion. I mean, on the one hand, yes, I do want them to include different types of ideas, but I will also hope that they would be, trying to control themselves and not just, put up 25 candidates in their primary debate that'll just, you won't even get a chance to listen to anybody because it'll be so chaotic and no time management. And the last thing to say really is, I think it's a real shame that Dr. Mark Allen Feldman is no longer with us, because he was just somebody who had so much charisma, and he also really talked about being a presidential candidate for every single person in America. He would have actually been somebody that was trying to represent every single person in America and genuinely meant it. But he's no longer with us. Rest in peace, Dr. Feldman. I thought he would have been a perfect vice presidential candidate in 2020 or 2016, even if that had been possible. But that's really what I think that, someone would want in a running mate. Someone who is not from a traditional political background, and someone who has lots of charisma, and someone who has the ability to reach out to everyone in America, as opposed to just a few. Whereas, Gary Johnson didn't do that with the choice of William Weld as a vice presidential nominee, because William Weld, was super establishment. Also, he wasn't a traditional libertarian, and, it was just, a bad combination, and I don't think it resonated that well with voters, even though they absolutely shattered the record for libertarian votes in a general election. They needed 5% in that particular election, and they did not get it. And I think if they had, two different people up there, there's a high chance that they would have actually achieved that magical 5%. But is Rand Paul a person to do that? I would say that Rand Paul is much more articulate than Gary Johnson, and he's much better at the sort of, political challenges. By challenges, I mean when people challenge his platform, he doesn't turn into just sort of a bumbling buffoon the way that Gary Johnson did. So Rand Paul would have that going for him. But can he resonate with all libertarian voters? It's possible. It's possible.